Welcome and thank you everyone for being here. I'm Jim. I'm the Director of Information GRC at Octopus. And I'm excited to talk to you today about how we at Octopus Deploy over the years have come to see the security, trust and compliance issues that we all face in a way that elevates it from box ticking exercises to becoming a real market differentiator. And that's because we treat our approach to compliance as a product feature, and we design it to both guide and support members of our organization so that our customers can benefit from high quality software and operations that the right standards can bring to any organization. So a little bit about me. I began my IT career back in the late 90s, and my first engineering tasks were to build a search engine for WordPerfect documents. I was recruited to fix hundreds of Y2K bugs at some local government place. And, after having, some of the development and leadership gigs over the years in finance and medical technology companies as well, I've sort of gained a healthy sense of paranoia about security. And I still have some PTSD from building PCI compliant systems for a level 2 merchant as well. So I started at Octopus in 2018 as a senior engineer. And since then, I've been heavily involved in bootstrapping and later leading our ISO 27001 and SOC 2 efforts. So having previously worked in medical tech and finance before, I feel that my exposure to leading these compliance software engineering efforts has sort of helped me out along the way. So I want to share some of the stuff that I've learned and how we're applying it here at Octopus. So before we dive in, I'll just set the scene for this journey that I'm going to take you on. To clarify, by the way, whenever you see the term compliance or security compliance, I'm sort of using those terms interchangeably, but just be aware that my team here also handles some of the regulatory compliance side of things as well. So with that all said, I'll take our initial challenges and why compliance is a must-have for any organization who manages risks from data privacy all the way through to payment processing concerns. I'll then give you some insight into what compliance as code and continuous compliance looks like in a practical setting, and reveal some of the ways that we automate evidence collection here so that you might be able to do it as well. Look at some of the quality control gates that exist and that we can leverage and how they're important to speeding up your audits. And then we'll have a look at some of the integrated monitoring solutions that we use here at Octopus as well. Let's get into it. So now, having spoken to some of our customers directly over the years, I've come to realize that it's a bit of a mistake for a vendor to assume the threat model of our customers. And while you've all got some similar core security requirements when it comes to policy-based issues, they can actually differ quite a bit. For this reason, I want to spend a little bit more time commiserating with some of you and explaining to others why this is such an important challenge, why I'm even here talking about how Octopus Deploy does security compliance at all. In a nutshell, it's hard, and proving it is even harder. So first, let's look at the vast majority of businesses' experience of trust, compliance, and security out there at the moment. So a lot of you will probably resonate with the things on this slide. There's costs associated with time and friction. Things slow down. So things like innovation, every manual compliance step creates a bottleneck, and it prevents new features from reaching the market quickly. And so you have these opportunity costs. You've got disconnected processes. Policies live in a document while the actual process lives in code, and the two don't always line up. Sometimes it's either redundant or it's friction, or sometimes there's no automation for the steps, and so they're ungainly. We have costs of audit scrambles as well. So we see a lot of wasted resources where, because audits basically suck, everyone avoids them, and we throw very limited people power at them. And the reality is that, manual compliance doesn't really scale very well, and small compliance teams can often become the biggest bottleneck for a growing organization. And the last thing you really want to do is pull off your valuable engineers off of really important work to chase down evidence and things like that. So that leads to a custom complexity as well, in that we have so many standards And that list is growing year by year. It's really hard to take a stock take of all the different standards we have to comply with, to be honest. But when you do, you start to see an exponential growth of security controls. And the more that you have, the more people think that it's box ticking. And that's the last thing you want people to feel like, is that they're just simply going through the motions and appeasing auditors rather than addressing real things. And so if you're in that state, you end up with this kind of quality degradation where the evidence that you collected in the first year kind of gets copied and pasted into the next year, and it degrades over time. And if you don't have the right guardrails in place, then all you're really doing is taking your poor practices and repeating them and potentially accelerating them. So I think most of us here are technically sharp people, but as a species, I think we're notoriously bad at collecting. We're notoriously bad at collectively assessing low probability and high impact risks. And we know that we shouldn't ignore compliance, but we miscalculate or outright ignore the true cost of getting it wrong. So I want to give you a little story I saw on Reddit the other day. So this is a bit of a cautionary tale. This was posted about 3 months ago. So this poor sysadmin, who shall remain nameless, just found out that they had over 200 shadow IPs, 200 shadow APIs exposed on their production web after getting hacked. They only really realized this once the forensic exercise was done. So I can really empathize with the sysadmin on this point. I can totally see how this can happen. They go on to state that the primary attack vector was a random endpoint designed to scrape customer data. And honestly, this is every business's worst nightmare, to have customer or employee data walk out the door. And this is despite having a SIEM, and they have API scanning in place. And it's only as good as the information that they give it. You know, they say, now compliance is breathing down my neck, because they want an inventory. And the sysadmin is left holding the ball. The single person is now expected to come up with all the answers. And obviously, this is a real problem. And they want to know, is anyone else dealing with this kind of nightmare? And of course we are. We all are. How do you track new infrastructure that can get created and set up in production in an instant? And, you know, they go on to say that they really wish they had real-time monitoring. And what stands out to me is that many sysadmins in this position right now would scream to lock everything down, kick everyone out. And that's a valid approach. But our sysadmin here is thinking about ways they could solve this without blocking developers. And I think that's admirable. And in the same breath, though, he's identifying that if you simply trust people to document their work, it's not going to happen. At least it's not going to happen fast enough. And I think that's because the perceived cost of manual compliance today always feels higher than the uncertain cost of risk tomorrow. That is the fine or the data breach. And we immediately choose pain avoidance over long-term risk reduction. You know, we can see that a $50,000 consultant quote for a new policy, and we can say no to that, but we see the 3 weeks of manual work for an audit, and we prioritize the next product feature instead. So there's this kind of there's this missed opportunity here to recognize where the risks actually are. So let's go through some of them. You've got direct regulatory fines and penalties. And these are the most obvious and immediate cost. You've got things like the GDPR, which can, the GDPR can result in, fines of up to 4% of a company's annual global turnover. And the problem here is your reactive compliance exposes you to these maximum fines because you can't prove the due diligence when the auditor shows up. You've got a loss of key certifications or contracts, and these are important because customers that you're involved in or contracts that you're involved in rely on these to exist. The problem is that if you've got bureaucratic compliance, you're creating so much friction that engineers bypass the official process. You've got business disruption and remediation costs. a major security incident caused by a compliance failure can lead to expensive recovery efforts, basically. And you only really find the hole after the ship has sunk. And fixing a vulnerability late is far more expensive than it is to prevent it in the first place. And then your shareholders are getting concerned as well. So you can experience a stock plunge off the back of a compliance failure. And the market sees breaches as evidence that the company doesn't have control over their core processes. And yeah, the list goes on. So, we can choose to ignore these drivers. We're inviting catastrophic failure. We're not just talking about things like reputation damage, we're talking about direct financial and operational costs that should be demanding all of our attention right now. Things like fines, loss of certifications, and even to the point where regulatory bodies will come out and mandate external monitoring, further slowing us down. So the whole "it won't happen to us" mentality is basically a statistical long shot, and it's a gamble. It shouldn't be seen as a risk strategy. Now, I'm sure you've all seen this platitude that trust is built through consistency over time, and before you groan too hard, I know it's a cliche, but I want you to consider for a moment that this statement really affects how an organization can choose to treat security and compliance. For example, when we establish consistent automated deployment pipelines or operational runbooks, what we're inherently doing is building trust into the process at the code level. And this is a key part of continuous compliance. This automation gives us the power to build trust through consistency, but it also gives us the power to accelerate poor practices at the speed of code. So it forces a choice. How will we use this power and how will we use it responsibly? So how do organizations achieve compliance? Well, what I've noticed is that every organization comes up with their own special brew of tackling these issues, but they basically choose one of three paths when it comes to audit and compliance. First up, you've got reactive compliance. Moments before the annual audit, someone runs around and collects or even creates as much evidence as possible to appease the as yet unknown auditor. Even if all of the controls are met, it's unclear if evidence exists to show it. And that's really the main issue with this model. People will complain that audit's a nightmarish whirlwind of sudden quick questions, and we panic as we realize that control number 122 hasn't been addressed at all, and so it's panic stations. But because it only happens once a year, it's okay, right? Well, it gets, there's other ways that companies can tackle this, and the other way is kind of the other extreme, which is bureaucratic compliance, where you have an army of consultants recruited to come in and build a massive disconnected information security management system which rules over the user base with an iron fist. And that will exist in a 500-page SharePoint document. Unfortunately, your real deployment processes are documented in other places like code, but they're certainly not following what's going on in the ISMS. And so in this model, people complain of spreadsheet hellfire and brimstone, 17 levels of change management, and the classic ivory tower security staff who seem to take pleasure in saying no a lot. And why is that consultant still here after 4 years anyway? The third model I see as being a lot more calm and orderly, and that is continuous compliance. Organizations that actually view security and trust as an investment in their products and services, they get compliance as a nice byproduct of that mentality. And they do this by finding things like internal champions. They might even hire people to come into the organization. But more importantly, they'll partner with experts to turn their abstract rules and into executable code that not only runs automated checks and balances, but it's also reporting back to auditors almost directly, sometimes directly. So in this model, you're not really collecting evidence later after the fact. It's getting generated with every deployment. Now, people may still complain that there's a lot of complexity to deal with, but I think in this model, they're more likely to recognize that doing this is part of doing business and it's important to our customers. So if you remember only one thing from my talk today, I want you to remember this, is that if you treat security compliance as a 3-week event, the quality of your evidence will degrade with every deployment, leading to audit risk and release delays. If you treat compliance, however, as a sustained automated product feature, you'll build continuous trust, ensure evidence integrity, and accelerate with every release. That is to say that compliance is a product feature worth investing in. So I'll take you back to this slide. I want you to know that continuous compliance is what we're aiming for at Octopus Deploy, and part of that is having an always ready to audit mentality. We try and integrate and unify evidence collection in our reporting, and we're always looking for ways to automate guardrails and checks with our own product. And we also use help of key third parties to assist us where it's not practical to build stuff ourselves. So I want to show you a little bit about how we do that. But first, some history. Like I mentioned, I started back in 2018. There was about 45 people. And yes, this is an image of all of us that fits on a single slide at that time. Back then, we took security as seriously as we do today, which is very seriously. However, the approach was also very different. To give you some context, our engineers were responsible for directly supporting customers against the features that they ship. But back then, it was via direct conversations with customers. And at that scale, engineers had to wear multiple hats, and support engineer is one of them. But similarly, our customers weren't really demanding that we have certifications, and the only formal cert that we have was the most basic of PCI self-assessments. I think it was about 20 questions at the time, and that was because we'd outsourced all of our payment processing to a third party. We also didn't have a cloud platform yet, and we had minimal regulatory pressure. So the primary one that we had to deal with was GDPR and anti-spam laws. It was just a much simpler time. But today we're almost 400 people, and we have entire departments dedicated to different areas of the business. So it could be argued that we have a lot less multiple hat wearing going on. However, everything is that much more complex. Now, you all out there need your vendors to have certifications like SOC 2 and ISO 27001. And so we got those. Governments and regulatory bodies have demands now too. Even US presidents are getting in on the act and making requirements for everyone to follow. So yeah, technology's importance to life has driven a lot of that. And so we're also seeing things like environment and social governance issues to consider. And we're more and more asked to explain how we roll in many more ways than simply security issues. So yeah, it comes with a little bit of pride that we've grown quickly, and we've been able to make these additional commitments to our customers over that time. But one of the lessons learned is that complexity really balloons with the company and customer base sizes. So keep all of that in mind when you're relaying it back to your situation. But I do want to share some strategies for minimizing the inevitable increase that one can expect. Basically, my advice for any company would be to get started early with this problem. That way you can take a crawl, walk, run approach and just slowly increment your maturity as you go. And it's important to remember that some businesses will tackle this late anyway. And if you're in that position where you've got lots of standards to build against and you're not really sure how to wrangle this complexity, then I'd recommend that you look at a singular framework first and pilot some of these strategies in against that framework and keep it small instead. So when you're crawling, you're starting simple and you focus on that single standard that makes the most sense for you. You invest a small amount of time and money in a compliance automation tool, for example. I would personally recommend something like Vanta or DRADA. Those are excellent tools, and they will take a lot of the pain out of tracking the things that you need to track. For us, when we were in this phase early on, we were looking at self-assessment questionnaires like the CAIQ from the Cloud Security Alliance. That was an excellent exercise. It was roughly 200 questions that we spent the time to pre-fill. And that meant that whenever we talked to a customer that was curious about these things, we had a a very systematic way to answer those questions, but it was really just the first step. Once you've met the controls for a single standard, it's now time to reduce the waste that you've created, because no doubt several spreadsheets and ungainly bullet point summaries of procedures will have been needed to exist for you to get here. So you might even have some policies that don't even line up with reality, and these are friction points. You need to get rid of the friction points as soon as possible, because that's actually the game, is that no matter where you are on this journey, you will always be uncovering them, and you always should be trying to push them towards zero. If you manage to do that, and you manage to manage your if you manage your risks systematically at the same time, then you should start to find that you've got some room to take on more difficult certifications. This is where you can start to optimize. So in our case, when we started to really run with this concept, we started to optimize things for our own desired workflows. For example, you might be able to use machine learning techniques to speed up questionnaire fill-outs. You might be able to use similar methods to assess risks of your third-party vendors. You should be able to tackle bigger certifications because you've got a stronger handle on the basic controls that all of the certifications want you to meet. However, I should state that it is a mistake to optimize too soon. If you speed up a bad process, you will just get bad outcomes faster. So in the last part of this presentation, I just wanted to take you through some of the automated ways that we are operating behind the scenes and give you a look behind the curtain, so to speak, but also how our product also is used by us to deliver it to you. So this is an example of how we do access reviews at Octopus Deploy. This is my own Slack, for instance. And we basically have a Slack bot that is integrated with our instant messaging system, and we incorporate access reviews directly into it. So whenever something changes in our IDP, myself or another admin is getting an alert to say, hey, this has changed. You should approve or reject this. And so we've done this so that we can keep track of it. And it's also timely. So we're all inside of Slack all the time, and it's our primary mode of communication. So this suits us very well. We've also tailored the reports that it generates so that we can pump them out to an auditor at any time. As I mentioned, we use Octopus Deploy to deploy Octopus Deploy. And that means whenever our auditors need to take samples of change control or access requests or access events themselves, so whenever someone's logging into our server, we're able to use this is my favorite feature of Octopus Deploy, honestly. We're able to use our audit page to show what's going on and give them a real-time view of the different types of changes. And you can drill into a variety of these events to get even more detail as needed. So I would highly recommend setting up a user role, for example, to allow a certain amount of access to your auditors if you need them to have direct access, or at least give them access to someone who does, that can take screenshots like this. And we can drill into each release and leverage the traceability back to our own source control system. So you can see here it's highlighted that you can go and view the commit on GitHub, and that means that you've got a direct line from the release back to potentially the business decision that drove the need for this change. If your teams are diligent about writing good PRs, then that information will be on GitHub. You can go one step further in that from there, because most of us will also have a ticketing system behind the scenes, and that will often integrate directly with GitHub. So that's the case for us, and we can show for any given release on our website, we can show our auditors the full chain of evidence from the point in time that the developer made the first commits all the way through to the test environment and back out the door through Octopus Deploy and into your hands in production. And I must say, every single auditor that I've dealt with has absolutely loved this fact, and it's streamlined so many questions about change control for us. Now, we actually manage segregation environments through Octopus Deploy as well, and that's through the tenants feature. And this also makes it really easy to explain to an auditor just how that logical separation is achieved. And if you've got different environments set up as well, you can show them and they can automatically see that you have segregated things in the right way. We also make extensive use of spaces to separate our own team's work, so we can define what's in and out of scope for auditing, for example. And this is important because we have hard walls with spaces. And so we can say, okay, well, the content team is out of scope. The core platform is in scope. And so we can track that and limit the amount of information that auditors need to see in order to make their determination as to whether or not we're meeting their controls or not. It's also worth highlighting that things like variables are effectively immutable. So this eliminates questions like, how do you manage secrets in prod? Well, the answer is right here. You can see here that the release had this version of the variable set. So they're all versioned and they're all immutable, which is fantastic. It means that an auditor's not really able to argue that you're not managing them well. If you have rotations, that will be recorded in audit history and so on and so forth. So even just the simplest of Octopus Deploy features really do help in this world. This also extends to things like operations. So your run books also are versions. So if you're putting a Octopus Deploy server in between your operations teams and your production environments, then you've already met half the requirements in PCI or ISO 27001 for separation of duties and environments. Configuration as code is also an important feature, and that allows us to go one step further in showing high quality change management practices. Auditors will often want to see, well, how is the deployment server built? And this is the perfect way to do that as well. Now, showing you behind the scenes, we use Vanta at Octopus Deploy. I'm a great fan of their tool. And like I said, I would recommend that anyone on this journey would look at a compliance automation tool similar to it to make sure that you're tracking all the things that you need to track. It will keep track of all of the controls for you. Instead of you having to worry about 17 different standards and how they all map together, this tool has already taken care of a lot of that for you. And then it's minimized the amount of repeat and redundant work that you'll do to find all of that information. It will also help you keep track of your inventory, and you can see that we have a lot going on, and this helps solve the problem that sysadmin was having. It's like, I don't know what's out in production, so how do I actually control for it? At the scale that businesses like ours operate in, you need to be able to show that you're doing a good job of tracking this stuff, or you simply won't gain certification. And a nice outcome of all of this stuff is that we can then produce real-time feedback to our customers through a trust center. And I'll give you a QR code at the end of this slide deck so that you can go and visit it if you'd like. But this is a portal into all the different compliance controls that we meet. You can review all of our sub-processes that we engage for GDPR purposes. So you can see our data privacy particulars in that regard. You can access all of our certs. You can even sign up for real-time updates when sub-processes change. So this is an important tool for us to give to our customers, and it wouldn't be possible if we weren't using some kind of automation behind the scenes as well. So with that all said, I want to say thanks for coming today and spending some quality time with us here at Octopus Deploy, learning about how compliance is important and how you can use a variety of automation technologies to achieve the same sorts of continuous, always ready to audit compliance mentality that we have here today. And if you have any questions or feedback, then I'd love to talk to you about that, and you can reach me via the socials below. So with that said, have a great day. I'm Jim, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.